Thank you for joining us on the Look Up Mindset podcast, where real stories of resilience, transformation, and adventure come to life. I'm your host, author, and storyteller, Heidi Siefkas. Each episode, we dive into the journeys of sheroes, heroes, and badasses who faced life's toughest moments and chose to rise. So get comfy, take a deep breath, and let's be inspired together. Hello, and welcome to the Look Up Mindset podcast. I'm your host, author Heidi Siefkas, and we are in today's episode entitled Pain with a Purpose, Creating a Beautiful Mosaic. We have invited a special guest, my friend, Krystle Knight from the Nashville Rescue Mission and a contributor to my latest book, Look Up Global Stories of Resilience. We welcome Krystle Knight. What is customary with the Look Up Mindset community is we let our guest self-introduce, because I, for one, have said I've been misintroduced so many times, and sometimes I learn new things about my guests during this self-introduction. So the floor is yours, Krystle.
Yes, hi, I'm Krystle Knight. I'm an operations coordinator, too, with the Nashville Rescue Mission. I've worked there for 4.5 years. And I'm going to be sharing some of my details of my story today. So,
a lot of people ask me, where did I find these incredible sheroes, heroes for this podcast? And in this first season, I have sourced these people from the contributors to my latest book. And then people follow up, well, how did you find contributors to your book? And when I started the book, I was residing in Maui. There was a horrible, tragic accident that changed my life. If you want to hear about it, it's in episode 3. And I decided to restart my life in Nashville. And that led me to the Gulch, or the downtown area of Nashville. And my home was adjacent to the Nashville Rescue Mission. I went knocking on doors for some stories from the Nashville Rescue Mission. And one of the leaders said, I think I have a woman with an incredible story for you. She has talked before for podcasts, and maybe she'd be interested in sharing her incredible story of resilience with you. And that's how I met Krystle. And since then, after interviewing her and creating her chapter, publishing the book, I've been volunteering at the Nashville Rescue Mission, and so I've got to know Krystle better, the family at the Nashville Rescue Mission even better, and we've also collaborated in other podcasts together. So it's kind of flourished since that, I guess, 1 or 2 degrees of separation. So now this is where the storytelling kind of starts. And so, Krystle, could you set the stage, as any good movie or series on the television? Where does your story take place, and when?
my story actually began, like I said, when I was younger, in my teenage years, and my story takes place in a lot of different areas over a lot of different time periods. So whenever I was 13-year-old, I got introduced and got into drugs, got to hanging around the wrong people. It was, my county got ravaged with it. We had teachers, we had all different walks of life, in Grundy County that had got engulfed in this. And so that was kind of like, I feel like now, a spiritual battle, where one of my spiritual battles began, and the enemy kind of lured me into something, because curiosity killed the cat. That was part of what got me into that, is I wanted to see what all was going on. And so at 13-year-old, I got a hold of methamphetamine for the first time. I ended up not doing that, but later on, at probably about 15, 16-year-old, I got a hold of it again. I started doing like weekend warrior in it, they call it the weekend warrior, where you're partaking in it. I was just a teenager. And so that went on off and on. And like I said, I got pregnant at 16 and I had my daughter at 17. A couple of weeks, or maybe a couple of months after she was born, because I'm 42 now. So it's hard to, have these memories sometimes are more vague than they once were. I started doing it again, or started doing it more often. And it went from there. Throughout the years, I was in and out of drugs. I had my daughter. I lost custody of her at 18 or 8 months old. And I was actually around 18-year-old. I moved out of the house. And it was just, my life was ravaged. And so throughout the years, I would try to get clean. I would try to, I would get my daughter back. I'd have her. I'd be doing good. And then I'd get back out again. So I met my husband, or my ex-husband, at probably, I'd say Trinity was around 4 or 5, about maybe 3 or 4. And we got together. We ended up we weren't married yet, and we had, or I had another son in between there. Yeah, it's so shady, because when you're involved in addiction, and it's hazy, when you're involved in addiction, it seems like there's no concept of time. I have memories in my life with my children that seem more recent than some of my other memories, but those memories actually flipped, because when you're under the influence, and when you become sober later on, like I am now, you look back and you try to recall some of this stuff, and it's actually pretty difficult, because, like I said, there was no concept of time, and you were, it's like you were in a different realm. But anyways, so I had a son named Aiden. That was in 2006. I met Bill, I want to say it around 2007 maybe, and we got together. We ended up having a child together at about a year in. His name was Mason, so that was my third son, or my third child. And we were both wrapped in addiction. He was he was a drinker, I was a drinker, and so when I would get clean from methamphetamines, I would end up drinking, thinking, "Oh, well, I'm clean, I'm doing good," And then alcohol became an issue, and then we both became alcoholics. There was so much abuse with each other, Like in one of my interviews that I did, I talked about, like, this is a headbutt scar. A lot of times people think that's a wrinkle. That's not. It wasn't just him. It was me too. We were both under the influence. We were not raising our kids the right way. And so throughout these years and all of this back and forth, getting clean, thinking, that I was going to make it. And then it was like my feet were on wet sand, or, trying to climb a mountain that the dirt was just falling out from under me. I just could not get my footing. I ended up leaving. And in 2020, after my children, we were married, years of abuse. And by that time, we had been married about 7 years, I guess. I ended up leaving. And that's how the real story started, the story that I want to talk about.
So the pivotal moment is 2020, which was a life-changing year for a lot of people, but it's also a changing year for you.
Yes, absolutely. And like I said, the years leading up to that were a part of it as well, but they were hazy. But the good Lord showed up for me in 2020. And it's not hard to remember these memories. Yeah, in 2020, even though it was so dark, and I ended up being on the run, I did not get to see my children. I'd lost everything. I had lost what I thought was my marriage, my home, and that I was just empty and I had nothing. God had started, like we talk about in the Look Up mantra, the perspective. He was changing my perspective. Now, at that time, it seemed dark, but he was setting the stage and laying the groundwork to get me here.
Where did 2020 lead you? It was leaving Bill and running from the law.
I went all over the place. I was living in hotels. I was staying with friends. I was driving all kinds of nice cars, riding nice motorcycles. As dark as this sounds, and not to glorify it, I'd have $1,000 in my pocket when this first started, but I was spiritually dead. You know what I mean? I didn't get to see my children. My family had nothing to do with me. I was hanging around and in groups of people that were really the wrong people. And this led me all over, from everywhere from Monteagle, Tennessee, to Atlanta, Georgia, to Kennesaw, Georgia, and to just from house to house, place to place. But like I said, in 2020, when I left originally in March, I ended up getting charged with aggravated assault, and I had to have a GPS bracelet on. And so I was going and I was reporting, and of course, like I said, I was off doing things I shouldn't be doing. But I ended up going on the run and going to Atlanta, Georgia. And at the end, before I got arrested, there was, I'd like to tell this story. Actually, this was the last night that I was free. I ended up waiting. There was someone had called the police on me, and I ended up waiting because something told me to stay, to wait. And when the officer got there, he told me, he was like, I said, well, if you run my name, I have warrants. And he was like, oh, well, with all the COVID going on and stuff like that, they're not going to want to extradite you or anything unless they really want you. And they did want me when he ran my name. He's like, I'm sorry, but they must really want you. So when he put me in the back of the police car, I told him thank you. And he said he had never been told thank you to put somebody in the back of the police car. And one day I would actually like to find my arresting officer. I've had many, but this, my last arresting officer, and show him things like this and my, like the documentary about Amy Grant's ranch and my girls that walked across the stage and things that I get to be a part of because of him. And this has to do with the Look Up mantra as well. Because of that stage being set and the actions of that man, my life was changed. And I get to do things like this. And I would like for that arresting officer to get to see that. But in the back of the police car, he had the radio on. I heard in my spirit, I want you to listen to the radio. I'm talking to you. Now, some people, maybe unbelievers or people who maybe think differently or don't really get into that as much, might say, oh, well, that stuff's not real. But I know it's real. I've lived it. And my perspective was changed that night in that police car. He told me to listen to the radio because I'm talking to you. And there was a song playing, and the lyrics talked about the white wolf or the black wolf. The beast you feed is the one that's going to be in control. And my Lord told me, Krystle, you have to choose to lay down this version of yourself. You're in this darkness because of your own actions. But I love you, you know what I mean? And I'm gonna help you lay down that version of yourself and become who I want you to be. And so the next song that played was a man singing to a woman, and he was telling her in the lyrics, I know you're going to be angry, you're going to be mad at me, but I love you and I know what's best for you. I haven't yet to be able to find the other song. I actually did find the first one, the original, but years later, I got to give my story in a radio interview, and that went back out into the radio for the Southeast to hear what God had told me in the back of a police car through the radio to me, and it's just, yeah, that's really cool. You can't dream stuff. You can't make stuff like that up. And so, yeah, that's definitely one of my perspective changes right there.
I don't think many people would thank a police officer, or wait for the police to catch them, but also have, well, maybe people have had epiphanies in the back of the police car, but, kind of very fitting for Tennessee being so musical that the messages were translated via 2 songs.
And that he brought me to Nashville, Music City. Just want to talk about it.
So where did this take you? I took you to probably multiple jails.
Yes.
And then eventually, how did you find the Nashville Rescue Mission?
So that took me to Whitfield County, Georgia jail. I wasn't there very long, a couple of weeks. And so I had a felony fugitive from justice is actually one of the things that they brought me in on. And so when I got brought in front of the magistrate, in front of the judge, because we were having to do it through Zoom meetings because of COVID. So like I said, weird time. He agreed that if I would agree to let Tennessee come and get me for my warrants, that they would drop the fugitive from justice and Georgia would, extradite me to Tennessee. And so we did that. And then that ended up bringing me to Franklin County, Tennessee, which is actually where I was born. And as you know, not trying to skip ahead, but I'm now married to a Franklin. I was seeing a lot of the word Franklin a lot. And so anyways, that brought me to Franklin County, Tennessee, where I spent months in jail, and I got closer to God. I read my Bible. I made, like, connections with some sisters who were also going through the same thing that I was going through then, who are also now in recovery in different parts of Tennessee and doing the same thing I'm doing in different areas. So yeah, and they have 5 years sober as well. And it's just a beautiful thing to see their stories too. Kind of want to branch off because, one of them has a new child. She's married. And so we were in that jail together, and it's just amazing to see that. And then from there, I was extradited to Grundy County, Tennessee, and they went ahead and set it up to where, in lieu of me going to prison, I could come to this program. But I did have to graduate it and complete it. And then that ended up bringing me to the Nashville Rescue Mission.
And weren't you asked about the Nashville Rescue Mission once before, and you said, I don't need that?
Actually, and see, that's like I was telling you earlier. It's like how some of these memories can be choppy and stuff. One of my run-ins with the law where I actually got arrested on something, of course, and then I spend a little time and then I get out. Like I said, in 2020, this was a straight through thing. But during this mess, one of my brushes with the law, when I got booked in, they tried to get me to come to the mission, and I said no. So,
yeah. So what did the Nashville Rescue Mission accomplish for you?
They gave me a new way of life. First, there's hope that lives there. That's one of our mantras there, is hope lives here. And, they take care of your basic needs first. They shelter you. They feed you. They give you clean clothes. But when you come into the life, because we have a shelter part for our guests, but we also have a life recovery part which is what I went through. When you come into the life recovery program, they do the same thing as they do on the shelter side, except for it's way more extensive. You're there for 7 months. You have classes. You go through different levels. You have Bible studies. You have therapists on staff. I mean, for any given person annually, what is put into the girls' new walk of life, their therapy, their shelter, the water bill, it's around $70,000 worth of, per person. That came from our CEO and our president. He gave me that information. So yeah, I mean, they take care of all the things that need to be took care of.
And how long was the program for you?
7 months.
7 months.
Yes.
And what happened after graduating?
Another perspective change. Even though I had so much hope since the night in the back of that police car and through the jails, through the darkness and all that, when I walked across that stage, by then I already knew that I wanted to work there, that I was being called to that place. But that, even though that was a completion and a graduation certificate, that is actually the doorway. That's the beginning. That's the beginning to your new life. It's not like, oh, well, I've done this and it's over. I'm done. That's the beginning to your new life.
So graduation was like walking through a door, and
yes,
you were given a paid position to work for the Nashville Rescue Mission. And since you've been promoted, and from my understanding, you're leading people like your former self through the program, being a role model and showing people, if I can do it, you can do it too. And one of the things that I thought was so beautiful about your story, you said that sometimes you have to share with the other guests about that life can shatter you, but you can build something like a mosaic that's even more beautiful than what was the original. And I think that really sums up kind of one of the look-up messages in your story. So could you tell me what today looks like? What's baseline for you now?
I definitely want to state to the listeners that every day is like a gift to me. I get to be a part of such beautiful things. There is never a dull moment at the mission when I'm at work. We never see the same day twice, But I get to be a part of these ladies when they get their children back, smaller things, when they quit smoking, when they get bigger things, when they get their GED, get jobs lined up, graduate, or maybe come on staff and be, fellow coworkers, and then go from there and get promotions. I get to be a part of all of that. And so, I'm married now. I have a wonderful husband, a beautiful marriage. I get to take PTO time and go on trips. I get to meet people like you. I have an awesome network. There, my life honestly is a life that I never would have thought even before this that I would have. Every day is a gift.
It's almost like your life has come full circle. And from my understanding, you met your husband through the rescue mission. He works at the rescue mission. Since your children and your family have gained closeness more than ever before. So you really walked through a different door into a new life.
Absolutely.
What would you advise to someone going through hard times?
Always look up. Just like the mantra of look up. I mean, and from a spiritual and a faith-based standpoint too, it has to do with look up, because this too shall pass. When you have dark moments, it's only temporary. It can be crushing, but like with my chapter, things that crushed me produced oil. That's, and what I mean is anointed oil. It's God was working in my life. And when we see something, our life shattered on the floor in a million pieces, we never know how it's going to be put back together just to make something just gorgeous. You know what I mean? Yeah. And so that is temporary, and and life is but a vapor, and to make the best of it.
In researching nearly the 30 stories that were in the latest book, I was trying to test to see if my hypothesis that this works for more than myself and a circle of friends. And I was hearing the same things, maybe in different phrases, but people were hopeful, even in their darkest hour. They found a sliver of hope. They found a shred of light. They looked up. They found beauty. They were in the moment. But the other thing is they didn't do it alone. And they leaned into community. And it sounds like you found community early on in some of your cellmates, and you still keep in contact with those women, but also the Nashville Rescue Mission became your foundation, family, and still is.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Community is very important. Like another thing from my perspective, or my faith perspective, is God says that it's not good for man to be alone. He gives us each other to lean on each other and to lift each other up and lend helping hands, when we can and when we need to. And so, yeah, it's just, network is very important. Community is very important.
So how can people connect with the Nashville Rescue Mission and the good work that you are doing?
Yes. So we have our website. We have the Nashville Rescue Mission website. We also have Volunteer Hub, which I know you're familiar with. We love to have our volunteers. We have 2 campuses. We have the men and the women's. We take volunteers for the kitchen, for the warehouse at the men's. We love our volunteers. We cannot do it without them. So if they're interested in volunteering their time, they can create an account on Volunteer Hub, sign up, and they can come breakfast, lunch, or dinner, or all 3 if they choose to, at the women's to serve meals. They can do that as well at the men's, and they can sign up for other things, special projects throughout the year, like painting walls, and like I said, warehouse, they do quite a bit at the men's. It's a little different for the women's, but Volunteer Hub and Nashville Rescue Mission's website. And that's how you donate as well.
As a volunteer, I would highly recommend it. Each time I go, I leave with a feeling of gratitude, a humbleness, and that it shifts your perspective of your own reality by getting a glimpse of others' reality. I thank you, Krystle, for sharing your story with this community and sharing it in the book. I want to thank listeners and viewers for sharing this space, this special sacred space with us where people can share their vulnerable stories. And if you like this episode, subscribe, share it with somebody else you know, and listen to the next one or the previous one. As I end every episode, Here's to looking up. Well, that's a wrap on today's episode of the Look Up Mindset podcast. Thank you so much for listening. If the story inspired you, please subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone who could use a boost. And remember, look up is always at your fingertips, whenever and wherever you need it. Until next time, here's to looking up.